You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynne Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 11th of December. And you won't get this date again for 100 years, that is the 11th of the 12th, 13. Harpenden sex image groomer escapes jail term. And Jem Chowdhury, Muslim vigilantes who terrorise non-believers, deserve pat on back. Police report into Rochdale's sex grooming scandal is rejected for second time. Bulgarian jihadis, if the sodomite Elton John dares appear, maybe you will encounter some surprises. Airbus maker EADS set to cut 1,000 French jobs. Rotterdam and The Hague rebel against EU immigrant influx. Austen Davis from Fantasy Island. Western leaders wearing Winnie's necklace to Mandela Memorial. Once again Australia leads the way as young Muslims denied passports over jihad fears. Thought for the day, am I inciting racial violence? And finally, when they had council tenants and not social housing ones. UK News. Harpenden sex image groomer escapes jail term. Mohammed Hussain of Longfield Road was found in possession of over 20 indecent photographs of children and on Friday was sentenced to a community order and banned from owning a device capable of holding images. Hussain was arrested in July 2012 after police officers launched an investigation and attended his property to search his phone. The 24-year-old had been chatting to a number of teenage girls aged 13 to 16 on online chat rooms and been requesting images which were found on his email account and smartphones. Appearing at St Albans Magistrates Court, Hussain, who had previously pleaded guilty to the offence in October, was sentenced to a 3-year supervised community order and treatment programme. Between June 28, 2010 and June 24, 2012, the restaurant worker made 4 level 1 images of children, 1 level 4 image and was in possession of 20 level 1 images. The level of seriousness goes from level 1 up to level 5. The court heard that after serving a previous custodial sentence for sexual activity with a child, Hussain took on 2 jobs and began studying at college. WTF, and he's still on the streets. Mitigating, his solicitor Sohail Bashir said, he is a man that has made some change to his life and somebody who has not returned to reoffending. World at 8, bloody hell. Good his solicitors and the judge's definition for reoffending is different to mine. I believe these ridiculous sentences are even getting the Liberals off their arses. Who are these judges? Are they all pedos themselves or Muslims, or don't they care? And Jem Chowdhury, Muslim vigilantes who terrorised non-believers, deserve pat on back. Hardline Islamic preacher Jem Chowdhury today said 2 followers jailed for attacking non-Muslims deserve a pat on the back. I don't condemn them at all. They are upstanding, upright members of the Muslim community. Their character is immaculate. They are fantastic individuals. People say much worse things on football terraces. Convert Jordan Horner 19 and Ricardo McFarlane 26 admitted being part of a Muslim patrol, a group of vigilantes opposing Western culture on the streets of the East End. Judge Rebecca Poulet told them, Islam is a peaceful religion and this conduct was anything but. World at 8. Just who is she trying to convince? Doesn't work for me. I can think of what I would like to pat them on the back with, and it ain't a hand. Police report into Rochdale child sex grooming scandal is rejected for second time. Greater Manchester Police have been slammed after it was forced into a second rewrite of its own report into how it failed the main victim of the Rochdale child sex grooming gang and now must produce a third. After members of the grooming gang who sexually abused a string of vulnerable girls were convicted in May 2010, senior police officers, council officials and Crown Prosecution Service lawyers apologised for failures which allowed the crimes to continue for almost 2 years after they were first reported. However, an official report into police failures has still not been published almost 4 years after the IPCC was called in. The father of the girl said it's ridiculous, it's taking too long. Rochdale MP Simon Danjuk said, I'm shocked and disappointed that GNP have got to take a third attempt at investigating what went wrong. Simon Danczuk criticised police for saying the case of 9 Asian men convicted for grooming and abusing white girls was not a racial issue. Similar abuse is still continuing in the Lancashire town, he told BBC Radio 4's World at One programme. In terms of whether it's still going on, I suspect it probably is. The intelligence that I receive as a Member of Parliament, and I keep my ear close to the ground, is that this sort of abuse is still occurring. Having said that, I think the various agencies involved are more alert to it and are doing more about it. I would also say that I think it's still going on, not just in places like Rochdale, but right across the country. Mr Danczuk said there was no doubt that the ethnicity was a factor in such cases. Mr Danczuk also dismissed suggestions made by Greater Manchester Police that the case was not about race. World at 8. These particular crimes have nearly always been committed by Muslims against non-Muslim underage girls of mainly white but occasionally non-Muslims from an ethnic community. It isn't race, it is a religious hate crime against humanity and should be treated as such. The fact is, if we didn't have so many Muslims here for the last 30 years, this particular form of sexual abuse would not be so prevalent in these areas. European news. Bulgarian jihadis. If the sodomite Elton John dares to appear, maybe you will encounter some surprises. Shh, don't talk about this. If you do, gay activists such as San Francisco city official Teresa Sparks and author Chris Stedman will condemn you for being Islamophobic. Jihadi Forum, Mujahideen of Tatarstan, Bulgaria, Russia, warn of surprises during the sodomite Elton John's 2014 tour to Bulgaria with Paul McCartney. From MEMRI, December 9th, thanks to Pamela Geller. The Mujahideen of Tatarstan, Bulgaria, Russia region have warned of some surprises during the 2014 European tour of British singer-songwriter Elton John, according to a Jihadi Forum. The Pakistani-based Juf.net republished a letter from Abu Umar, who is described as the representative of the Mujahideen of the Emirate of Bulgaristan, Tatarstan, warned against Elton John's visit to Kazan. According to the letter, imams of local mosques are already warning their audiences about the visit, accusing Elton John of promoting sodomy. Elton John and Paul McCartney are likely to kick off their 2014 tour at Lokomotiv Stadium in Sofia, Bulgaria on May the 17th, 2014. Following is the text of the letter. In the name of Allah, the Merciful, the Compassionate. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Peace and blessings be to Prophet Muhammad, his family, his companions, and all those who follow the straight path until the day of judgment. And then, may the peace, mercy and blessings of Allah be with you. We, the Mujahideen of the Emirate of Bulgaristan, Bulgar Mujahideen, urge the so-called government of Tatarstan to return to the straight path and save themselves both in this life and the hereafter. We remember your mockery over Muslims and do not forget your ban of the Koran. If you think you can get away without consequences, you are mistaken. And to the so-called imams of the spiritual administration, we tell for the last time, stop making up stories and speeches on behalf of infidels. It appears that the warnings of Prophet Muhammad do not reach you. We demand the release of Muslim prisoners whom you keep in your illegal prisons. And in conclusion, if the sodomite Elton dares to appear on the territory of the Emirate, maybe you will encounter some surprises. Meanwhile in Kazan, the imams of the mosque Zaka Banaya gather daily to condemn the British sodomite Elton John and voice their concerns and warnings if he shows up in the capital of Tatarstan. According to the Russian Rosbalt news agency, during Friday prayers, Imam Saeed Zagfar Lutfullah urged to cancel the visit of Elton John to Kazan. According to Imam, Elton John is going to call publicly for freedom of sodomy in Tatarstan and will support local pederasts. World at 8. I do hope Elton doesn't sing Candle in the Wind. Airbus maker EADS set to cut 1,000 French jobs. Some 1,000 jobs are set to be lost in France after European aerospace giant and the maker of Airbus aircraft, EADS, announced on Monday that it would be cutting some 5,800 European posts from its defence and space division. Rotterdam and The Hague rebel against EU immigrant influx. Two of Holland's biggest cities will deny tax or social security numbers to Romanians or Bulgarians who fail to pass housing and employment checks. Rotterdam and The Hague are ready to defy the European Union by denying immigrants a national registration number unless they meet stringent checks amid fears of an influx of Romanian and Bulgarians next year. The municipal authorities in the two cities have warned that they will defy central government by carrying out inspections to make sure EU migrants have honest employment and are not living in overcrowded accommodation. I now hand you over to Austen Davis, who reports from Fantasy Island.
I would like this evening to finally put the lid on Ralph Milliband, the late father of our beloved Ed, leader of the Labour Party. That is, I'd like to drain the teacup in which the storm that is the man who hated Britain non-story was played out initially in the Daily Mail, other national newspapers are available, on 1st October this year. The article in question, a character assassination of a prominent Jew, carefully sidestepped any accusations of anti-Semitism, courtesy of the journalist whose name appeared at the bottom of it, namely one Geoffrey Levy, who is not, let me assure you, a Gentile of this parish. Now, at this stage, it's only right and proper that I declare an interest here, because, as I read that article, it really was déjà vu all over again. Mr. Levy's piece was a veritable echo of one put together by, well, me, actually, fully 6 months earlier. Ralph Milliband's name was actually Adolphe, a fact he must have found quite hilarious as a Belgian-born Polish Jew watching Hitler's war machine smashing its way across continental Europe. He escaped, that is to say, he got on a ferry at Austen, to Britain with his father Samuel, leaving his mother and his sister to fend for themselves in Brussels, but hey, who are we to judge? Samuel Milliband was a prominent member of the Jewish Labour Bund prior to his leaving his Warsaw home. The Bund was a secular Jewish socialist society affiliated to the revolutionary communist Red Army, which murdered thousands of innocent civilians in their brutal attempt to take over Poland after the First World War. The leading role of the fanatical left-wing movement so beloved of Samuel Milliband is remembered by history in the genocidal Red Terror waged against the Christians of Eastern Europe. Their legacy was to foster suspicion and hatred of Jews throughout the region, which gave considerable grist to another man named Adolphe's mill when he popped up a few years later. Before leaving Belgium, young Adolphe Milliband joined Hashema Hatzaya, a socialist Zionist sect. Some of his compatriots went on to become Nazi collaborators, the so-called Jewish Gestapo of the Warsaw Ghetto, the creatures who assisted in the relocation of their friends and neighbours to nice new addresses in places like Auschwitz and Treblinka. Lovely people. But Britain's immigration screening was about as effective then as it is now, so both of these charmers ended up in London, where they swiftly set up in business, and I quote, rescuing furniture from bombed houses in the Blitz. An alternative term might be looting, feeding on the dead and dispossessed of the capital in the time-honoured fashion of immigratus parasiticus, and still practised with alacrity today. And then young Adolphe Milliband made that diary entry, the one that young Ed got so upset at the Mail for publishing, even though it was an edited version. My listener, on the other hand, deserves to get the full fat version, and so he shall. The Englishman is a rabid nationalist. They are perhaps the most nationalist people in the world. When you hear the English talk of this war, you sometimes almost want them to lose it, to show them how things are. They have the greatest contempt for the continent in general, and for the French in particular. They didn't like the French before the defeat, 1, because they don't have order, 2, because they talk too much, 3, because they change their ministers every month, etc. Since the defeat they have had the greatest contempt for the French army. Always it is England first. This slogan is taken for granted by the English people as a whole. To lose their empire would be the worst possible humiliation. The Englishman may well be a rabid nationalist, one lives in hope, but might our young immigrant friend not have been a damn sight more appreciative of the people who had just saved his sorry arse from a lifetime membership, although probably not a particularly long one, of the German-occupied Europe Club? But fortunately for him and his two delightful offspring, his distaste of the British character didn't stop him helping himself to the fine education on offer in this country, or indeed from spending the rest of his life here. Adolphe, and I shall continue to refer to him by his given name, mindful that it might just wind somebody up, gravitated to the London School of Economics, which had relocated to Cambridge so to avoid that nasty war which was causing unpleasantness in the capital. There he was taught politics by Harold Laski, a deranged communist. Laski was disowned by the Labour Party, who referred to him as a dangerous Marxist revolutionary. He is probably best remembered for his incitement of violent revolution, his admiration of the Soviet Union and all things Stalinist, and for having a mother whose maiden name was Frankenstein. No, I'm not making it up. Go and check him out for yourself. Laski. As fine an English name as ever I've heard. And Adolphe loved him to bits, hanging on to his every word. He spoke freely of the genuine sense of outrage he felt in respect of bourgeois England, and yet he stayed, making a very comfortable career for himself in academia, where he was extremely well paid for poisoning the minds of a generation with his anti-establishment Marxist-Zionist rhetoric. A quick nota bene at this juncture, if I may. Anyone picking up the phone to the thought police to shout anti-Semite at an annoyingly high volume should first take the trouble of learning to differentiate between Semite, as in race, and Zionist, as in philosophy. Thank you. Adolphe became apoplectic during the Falklands conflict, which he opposed with ferocity, and was dismayed at Britain's audacity in sending a task force to the other side of the world in order to protect fellow Britons. It probably confused him. Loyalty is not something that seemed to feature much in Adolphe's world, as his mother and sister might well attest. Likewise the former occupants of the former Warsaw ghetto his mates rehoused. Adolphe was ambiguous about the Stalinist slaughter of 30 million souls, which number dwarfed the military fatalities suffered by all parties throughout the entire Second World War, and about the Soviet invasion of Hungary in 1956. In fact, Adolphe Milliband was a past master of explaining inconvenient truths, like Gorbachev and Yeltsin's effective condemnation and deconstruction of Soviet socialism and the corrupt parody of the worker state it purported to be, which he claimed to welcome. He said that the Cold War had always been a useful bogey for the right to exploit, and by democratizing Soviet society, Mikhail Gorbachev had upstaged the West and neutralized its most potent weapon. Of course, our committed champion of socialist deconstructionism could be more than a tad ambiguous towards the system generally and capitalism in particular when it came to what he wanted for himself and his family. His sons David and Ed both enjoyed the elitist decadence of Oxford University's dreaming spires, and wily old Adolphe managed to transfer ownership of his £1.5 million house on Eddy Street, Primrose Hill, to his elder son David by pulling a most un-Marxist tax avoidance scam to avoid death duties. I understand there to be a Marxist precept writ large in the manifesto of the Communist Party that incorporates the words property and theft, but clearly it doesn't apply to anyone called Milliband, or indeed to any other sham champagne socialists of the extreme left. Yet for all his distinctly capitalist successes, and the great learning and understanding he amassed, and for the enormous respect he enjoyed in Marxist circles, Adolphe shuffled off this mortal in 1994, a bitter and disappointed man. and he died without seeing his two overachiever sons embark on their parliamentary careers, where they became bastions of the very establishment he supposedly hated so much. He'd completely given up on the Labour Party. He saw it as a party of modest social reform in a capitalist system, within whose confines it is ever more firmly and irrevocably rooted. Poor old Adolphe. He now lies in Highgate Cemetery, just 12 yards from his hero Karl Marx, the man who wrote the template for his life. On his headstone is a 3-word inscription: writer, teacher, socialist. Ed Milliband made an emotional response to the trashing his late dad received at the hands of a sensationalist tabloid, and he went to some lengths to demonstrate that Adolphe, all right, just this once, that Ralph Milliband never had been the man who hated Britain at all. He loved his father, and doubtless that love was returned, of course. And for what it's worth, I'm inclined to agree with him. Adolphe, aka Ralph Milliband, didn't hate Britain and the British at all. He despised them with a passion. Milliband lived to forgive the Germans for the horrors they perpetrated in his homeland and inflicted on his countrymen, but he never forgave the British for rescuing him from it. Austen Davis, World at 8, Fantasy Island.
Thank you, Austen. Succinct and to the point. Millipede should be afraid. Very afraid. World news. Western leaders wearing Winnie's necklace to Mandela Memorial. Judy MacLeod for the Canada Free Press rights. Barack and Michelle Obama, Bill and Hillary Clinton, George and Laura Bush will all figuratively wear a necklace at Nelson Mandela's memorial tomorrow. The Winnie Mandela necklace that is the most grotesque one of all time. Time and the politically correct era can never wash away the crime of humanity foisted on the blacks of South Africa when Communist African National Congress, ANC, freedom fighters and liberators sent hundreds to their death via the burning tar necklace. The crime of the so many black brothers and sisters chosen for death by necklace? Suspicion of being too friendly to whites. ANC members would take black people and hack off their hands or tie them behind the person's back with barbed wire. Then a gasoline-filled tyre would be set alight around the victim's or traitor's neck and they would slowly and very painfully burn to death. Winnie Mandela famously screamed to thousands at a large open-air rally in 1985-86, "With our matches and our necklaces we'll liberate this country," implying that those who do not take ANC's side would be burnt alive. Such threats by Winnie Mandela could very well be considered terrorism against the very people she claimed to intend liberating. World at 8. Actually, we could make some money out of this. Design a rubber tar black diamond necklace with ruby flames and sell it to the followers of Nellie and Winnie the Pooh. Don't ya love that idea? Once again, Australia leads the way as young Muslims denied passports over jihad fears. 20 Australian Muslim men have been denied their right to travel abroad after their country's intelligence services cancelled their passports over fears of having jihadi mentality. Abu Bakr, a Bankstown labourer, is amongst 20 Sydney men whose passports were cancelled by the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation. The spy agency accuses them of preparing to engage in politically motivated violence overseas. The Muslim men were also said to be a threat to national security because of a jihadi mentality. Basically, they're suspected of being terrorists or wanting to go overseas and participate in jihad war, or whatever other reasons. Lawyer Zali Barrows, who was approached by 15 of the men whose passports had been cancelled, told ABC News. World at 8. That and or rape of minors, I would suspect. Thought for the day. Am I inciting racial violence? Now, before I start my short thought today, I must share one of the many wonderful comments on Monday's news, and it is, "Manny, come and light my tyre." I was not sitting in a dry seat after I read this, amongst all the very sober and heartfelt comments. Beautiful, and thanks. And also, to cap it all, the BBC, who have always maintained that they never discuss current political affairs on their soaps, EastEnders, have actually done a scene and the last EastEnders they showed, of a black and a white resident of the square looking lovingly at a picture of Milliband, and both saying that they felt they were not alone when they looked at this picture. So much for the BBC and the fact that they don't do current political affairs. Now, what I'm about to say does not amount to race hatred, disliking black people or inciting racial hatred. It is a simple fact that although the media and political historians lie like truth, the camera, or rather mobile phone footage, rarely does. All the nastiest things seem to be recorded on that media and circulated around the world with monotonous regularity by idiots of all colours, creeds and countries. Now, what prompted me to talk about this particular film is the absolute shock value of it, and what is primarily terrible is the fact that no one, not one person, not one paper and not one TV presenter has commented on the prime cause of my anger. What is it, you might ask yourself? Another case of animal cruelty, a raping of a white child by Muslims, or a case of murder and mugging? No, it is the footage shown to the court of Adolphe standing waving a machete in his bloodied hands and presenting his case to the British public with Bombardier Lee Rigby's decimated body on the road in front of him. And you know what I find most shocking? The plain fact that cameras do not lie, and during his rants several black women passed him by almost rubbing shoulders with him. One was pushing a baby stroller by almost nonchalantly, and do you know, not one of these black women even blinked an eye at what was on the ground near them. That is what I found shocking in the extreme, that these people, who no doubt were born here and had probably witnessed the whole thing without moving to help or hinder but film on their mobiles, were clearly making their getaway before most people turned up. Now, this area of enriched London is not known for its propensity of white indigenous tribes, and if you look very closely at most of the footage you will see more people of colour than white people, and all are doing absolutely nothing to stop an act that must have taken more than a few minutes to achieve. The official film footage slides off the main ethnicities of the audience at the games because, despite the rantings of the media on the two brave white women who approached these murderers well after the event, they have ceased to comment on the lax approach of the mainly black persons filming it or just hanging round watching this terrible murder. Why? It is the same prejudiced attitude that now dwells in the heart of this country and its authorities of not rock the boat. Again, why? Well, this particular boat is rather too full of ethnic minorities nowadays, so cannot be rocked, or apparently there will be civil unrest or racial tensions. Now, with the hatchet job on poor young Lee being performed in the open, in public and in daylight, this shows a worrying trend in black and Muslim behaviour, and what is more worrying is the way in which the police and judicial system handled it. Firstly, I don't believe they impounded any of the mobile phones from members of the public, whether black or white, who filmed it. And believe me, there was a crowd of them towards the end. None have been subpoenaed to my knowledge to stand as witnesses in what must have been the most witness act of this year, if not this century. They then shoot to wound what is obviously a highly deranged black person, armed and dangerous, who has a partner equally armed and dangerous. Still no questioning of the already fleeing audience, complete with their mobiles, which contain an act of murder on it, and then proceed to take the wounded killer to hospital. We then have to sit through, or rather Lee's family do, a multi-million-pound High Court case in which the two murderers plead not guilty because of course they were on a jihad against a white non-believer, and this is allowed in our courts today, a plea of Sharia. Tell me where I've gone wrong on this, will you? In any country in the world, and I'm including the US here, this act would have resulted in a very different scenario. In the States, neither would have survived that day, let alone in jail afterwards, and no one would have made it to hospital. In Saudi or any Middle Eastern country, if the act had been carried out by white Christians, they would not have survived a minute. China, Japan, India and Russia would have killed them on the spot, and if a sectarian killing in Ireland, north or south, they would have been kneecapped before execution. Us? We're actually looking after and protecting black murderers who are seen to be hacking a young white guy to death after running him over with their car with an audience of mainly black citizens looking on. Am I the one going mad here, or is this very wrong? What must be stressed is that at this stage no one knew Lee was a soldier, did they? He was in civvies and anyone can wear a Help for Heroes t-shirt. I can understand the innocent until guilty laws with the average murder investigation and court hearings, but these two not only are shown on film as doing it, but are advertising themselves on TV as doing it. So how come the court hearing? It should take 2 days, 1 day for the prosecution and 1 day for the defence. The second half of the second day should be the sentencing, and it should be life without parole to be served in a Nigerian jail, and their entire families should be deported back to whence they came. I don't like splitting families, it's humane. That is what should have happened. The members of the audience also should be arrested and fined for not doing anything to stop it. Even chucking something at these two or running them over would have helped, not just standing there filming it. And that is what worries me more than anything else. Would our police act the same way if the white population in certain areas was under an obvious threat from the enrichers from whatever religious or criminal acts they could concoct? Would our towns and cities look like parts of the cities which suffered the riots some summers ago when mainly blacks were looting and beating up and burning? Would our media only film the few whites doing the same thing for publicity so as not to heighten racial tensions? Would we as a tribe be sacrificed on the altar of diversity and multiculturalism so that the powers to be could rest easy in their beds at night as Lee Rigby has been sacrificed? I'm not inciting racial hatred, but I am however worried for the future in which our own police, who we pay for the most part, not the enrichers, and for whom we appear not to count. If our police, army and CPS can ignore one young white butchered soldier, imprison another for killing the enemy abroad, be seen to idolise and compare to Jesus Christ an old black terrorist, and give honours to the mother of a young black guy who was into drugs and got killed, heap more honours on foreigners who shouldn't even have the right to vote in this country, and educate young foreigners above our own, what chance do we stand in our own country of birth? When I watch the scenes of the watchers of the killing of Lee, I see the future, and Enoch was right. I see rivers of blood running through London. I truly don't believe that even Enoch would believe the state of the nation today. And it isn't being racist to say that had we listened back then, Lee Rigby would still be alive today. And finally, on a lighter note, extracts from letters written by council tenants, or should we call it social housing now? It's the dog's mess I find hard to swallow. I want some repairs done to my cooker as it has backfired and burnt my knob off. I wish to complain that my father twisted his ankle very badly when he put his foot in the hole in his back passage. Their 18-year-old son is continually banging his balls against my fence. I wish to report that tiles are missing from the outside toilet roof. I think it was bad wind the other day that blew them off. My lavatory seat is cracked. Where do I stand? I'm writing on behalf of my sink, which is coming away from the wall. Will you please send someone to mend the garden path? My wife tripped and fell on it yesterday, and now she is pregnant. I request permission to remove my drawers in the kitchen. 50% of the walls are damp. 50% have crumbling plaster and 50% are just plain filthy. The next door neighbour has got this huge tool that vibrates the whole house and I just can't take it any more. The toilet is blocked and we cannot bath the children until it's cleared. Will you please send a man to look at my water? It is a funny colour and not fit to drink. Our lavatory seat is broken in half and now is in 3 pieces. I want to complain about the farmer across the road. Every morning at 6 a.m. his cock wakes me up and it's now getting too much for me. The man next door has a large erection in the back garden which is unsightly and dangerous. Our kitchen floor is damp. We have 2 children and would like a third, so please send someone round to do something about it. I am a single woman living in a downstairs flat and would you please do something about the noise made by the man on top of me every night? Please send a man with the right tool to finish the job and satisfy my wife. I've had the clerk of works down on the floor 6 times, but I still have no satisfaction. This is to let you know that our lavatory seat is broke and we can't get BBC Two. My bush is really overgrown round the front and my back passage has fungus growing in it. Of course this was taken when council tenants could actually speak English and not Urdu, Farsi, Bengali, Polish, whatever passes for languages in Eastern Europe, Swahili, Chinese, Korean, and yet hundreds more languages, but not English. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynne Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.